Kevin McDonald came on the programme, I think it was last week. This is his documentary about Whitney Houston, made with the cooperation of the family and the state, although, as you said during the interview, authorization doesn't mean that it's in any way sort of bound or in any way
or compromised.
It's a story that's been told before. Obviously, we had the Nick Broomfield documentary not so long ago, and it is absolutely true that it is a tragic story of, an extraordinary talent cut short during the course of this documentary, which typically of Kevin McDonald is very thorough, loads of interviews, real sort of detailed stuff. We hear of the roots, we hear of her identity crisis, her rise to fame, her marriage, and inevitably her decline.
Why didn't Sissy do more?
She didn't want Whitney mad at her.
Because she'd already been mad at her earlier in her life.
Yeah. And when she tried, she would go up to her house, but Whitney wouldn't let her in. You had to get permission to go through that gate.
Why would nobody confront the situation?
Money, their jobs, their nice houses, their access to other celebrities. The fact that, in my opinion, they had no marketable skill set other than being a Houston or related to a Houston. I mean, that's a lot. That's hard to give up. They probably felt, I guess a little bit in their defense, that she's choosing to do this. Why should I give up my lifestyle?
I once talked about why she didn't stop, and she said, I like it, and I'm going to do it until I want to stop.
So McDonald said when he came on the programme that when he was initially asked whether he wanted to do the documentary, which came with all this access and all this archive, that he wasn't particularly interested. He wasn't a fan of Whitney Houston. He was told to speak to some people. And then somebody said to him specifically, look, I don't know why she ended up the way she ended up, and I want you to make the documentary to help me solve that mystery. And so he described himself as a kind of celluloid psychiatrist come detective. And remarkably, as we discussed on the podcast last week and has been widely reported in the press, he goes looking for a smoking gun and finds one. And I think it's really necessary to say that it's very rarely that in this kind of documentary you would get something that actually looks like, oh, look, we may have found something at the root of all this. Not to say that everything is reducible to the thing that he finds towards the end, but there is, from a sort of, obviously from a narrative structure, from a dramatic point of view, it is very well, it is well played out. It's also worth saying that it's a demonstration of doing your research thoroughly. I mean, going back to a Simon Bates interview that raised the red flags all those years ago. The other thing is that obviously when you're watching something like this, and I was thinking about Amy, the Asif Kapadia film, which, is so powerful, but is absolutely heartbreaking. There is a part of you that cannot help but feel guilty and compromised by the fact that you're watching a story of tragedy, particularly when you know that how the media responded, how comedians turn these things into jokes, and there really is nothing funny. No matter how famous somebody is, there is nothing funny about somebody unraveling in public. But in both the cases, and I have to say this is true of the Broomfield documentary as well, the thing that I came out of it with, because I wasn't a Whitney Houston fan, but I did come out of them thinking, wow, I mean, the voice is extraordinary. The sequence, my favourite sequence in this documentary is talking about the Star Spangled Banner, and which is the thing about, turning it from a waltz step into a four-step, and, the difference between that skip time into something which goes from being a battle hymn into being a freedom song. That sequence, I think, is absolutely spine-tingling. And you hear enough of that stuff to really get a sense of, as I said, as somebody who wasn't a fan before, thinking, well, that is an incredible voice, an absolutely incredible voice. And I think that Kevin McDonald's done a very solid job of what is a tragic story.